So pandemic parenting tools for stress management and emotion regulation. So what are we going to be talking about today? Tonight, I guess. Basically, when we look at things, I mean, if you think about it, today actually marks, as probably you've all heard, the 1-year anniversary of the World Health Organization announcing that we were in a global pandemic. And so this has been a year now of pandemic parenting. This is a year of uncertainty and a year of change, a year of fear, a year of exhaustion, and a lot of isolation. And there's no doubt that these are tough times. And in some ways, there's no greater truth than that really right now, right? We're a year into this of feeling very overwhelmed, overtired, overstretched. I don't know who's actually here in terms of who filled out the survey, but among the survey, there was only one person that was a stay-at-home parent among all of the parents that responded to the survey, telling us that most of our families are having 2 working parents for the most part in the home, some traveling and outside of the home for work, but most including 2 people at home working. So, you know, all of us want nothing more than a return to normal right now. It's certainly incredibly difficult to be an adult right now. It's incredibly difficult to be a child right now. And we're asking ourselves every day to show up sort of more depleted than ever to take care of children who are understandably more frustrated, more sad, more angry and anxious than they've ever been. So what can we do when life feels impossible and when we have to continue doing what we do each and every day? What can we do when there's no clear answers or solutions? Well, we can come together for support. We can see each other. We can affirm that we're in this together just to feel a little less alone. And so here we are. And that's one of the main reasons for doing these workshops, I think, is to bring people together. So we're going to start by going through a little bit on how families are doing. We actually have data now on how families in Canada are doing, how kids are doing, how parents are doing, and also how that's changed over the course of the last year. We're going to move in after that into self-care. So until we talk about anything else, we need to talk about how we can nurture ourselves as parents, how we can take care of ourselves, how we can give ourselves some compassion as we navigate this tough time. We'll go through some parenting tips, some key tips that we think would be helpful for you. Just a couple of things really, just to not overwhelm you, but really look at if you're going to put your energy somewhere, what's going to make the biggest difference. And then we're going to talk specifically around emotion regulation and how to help our kids manage difficult emotions. So it's an ambitious agenda, but we should be able to cover it. All right, so I'll let Tessa take over for this part.
Yeah, so like Carolyn mentioned, it has been 1 year of COVID, 1 year since the World Health Organization declared a pandemic. But what that means is that tomorrow is the anniversary of them announcing that schools are shutting down, right? And that was originally supposed to be for 2 weeks after March break. And then came the announcement that it was actually going to be extended until the end of May, right? So when we think about how families are doing over the course of the last year, we have to remember that there's been all of these announcements and fluctuations that have happened that change our mental health or well-being and as well as our child's, right? So after that, it was extended until the end of the year. And then, of course, schools were announced to come back, and that came with its own uncertainty. But I think for most, it was a welcome change to have kids be able to attend in person, but, you know, unclear about how that was going to go. And then in December, there was a second lockdown, right? That I think came as a bit of a shock, it at least did for me, and schools shut down again. And of course, that was extended with the spike they saw in January after the holiday break. But schools were able to return, and, you know, February 1st, they returned. And then, of course, most recently, March break was postponed. And that's just kind of the last thing in a long list of changes that parents have had to adapt to over the last year. And that's not including any individual circumstances, right? I know for important dates that stand out, right, it might be the first contact tracing or the first time yourself or someone you know has contracted COVID, right? And the fear that comes with that, but also miss large events, right? Missing graduations, missing sporting events, weddings, funerals, those types of things. So we can see over time how parents and kids have been affected by this. And the UK has done a really good job of tracking this. And they have this really nice graph where you can see in the first lockdown, parental stress and depression were really elevated. And as the summer came, lockdown restrictions were loosened. School, you know, you're in summer, you're not in school necessarily, similar to what happened in Ottawa. And you saw reduced levels of parental depression and stress. And then, of course, they had their second lockdown with the variants, but we had a second lockdown for the holiday surge. And here you see parental stress, depression, and now anxiety are increasing. So even though at a moment of time we have these individual pieces of data, when you look at how kind of these ebbs and flows come, none of this is normal. But with all the increasing lockdowns, the stress that comes with the isolation of a lockdown, you see it affecting parental mental health. And similar on the child side, you can see like very, very similar patterns, right? Attentional, emotional, behavioral concerns, they're going up during that first lockdown. The longer it gets extended, the more it peaks. And then it comes down a little bit. Summer was better. You could see your friends, a little bit more socializing, less of that stress of balancing school. And then again, they had a second lockdown and you see the spikes go up again. So when we see points in time, right, we don't always know 100% about what's going on, but I think you can see that the isolation of lockdown, even when you get a little bit of things back, it can be sometimes a bit better, but none of it's normal. So in Canada, there was a survey that went out all across Canada in June, and it was asking parents what they were very or extremely concerned about. So what were really the toughest parts of COVID? And the number one answer, which was even higher in elementary school parents, was balancing childcare, schooling, and work, right? That juggling process of all these different responsibilities that overnight came to be. Other concerns included managing child's emotions, right? Behavior, stress levels, anxiety, as well as having less patience, raising their voice. I know none of you yelled at your kids in the last year, but staying connected with family and friends, supporting each other were also concerns, as well as feeling lonely in their own home, right? These are all concerns. Carolyn, you got to keep clicking.
Oh, sorry.
These were all concerns that came up, and I was thinking of how I could represent this, and for balancing childcare, schooling, and work, what does this look like if we think about the Ottawa community of families? Well, you think about Lansdowne Stadium, you could fill 3 Lansdowne stadiums with parents who are very or extremely concerned about this balancing of childcare, schooling, and work. So it's a huge number of people that are experiencing a lot of difficulties with this, right? It's not an easy thing to do. It's an incredibly difficult thing to do. And on the child side, a survey from CMHO, which is Child Mental Health Ontario, went out kind of the same time, June, end of lockdown, and it was asking parents what they noticed about their children. And 59% saw behavioral changes in their children, and that included outbursts or extreme irritability, drastic changes in mood, behavior, personality, right? These are the temper tantrums that were reported on the survey we sent out a lot. Difficulty sleeping, altered sleep patterns, and persistent sadness. And we think about what does 59% of the kids in Ottawa look like, right? Again, bringing it back to that community. If you went to the biggest stadium in North America, Michigan University, it wouldn't have enough seats to fill that 59% of kids in Ottawa alone that are having behavioral changes from COVID-19. So just driving home the point that this is a huge, huge impact that's gone across all levels in Ottawa, but also globally. Now, over time, there's been a lot of concerns around kind of like, is it getting worse? Is it getting better? If we look at how it's changing through the lockdown. And still, this is from the first lockdown. It's not as new data, but it's only recently published, right? We're always a little bit behind on getting the data published. But the blue piece is the smallest piece of the pie are kids that got better, right? From the start of the lockdown to the end of June, you're seeing improvements in their mental health. Well, maybe that was, they were really low to start with. It hit them really hard at first, or maybe not going to school was a really welcome change, right? They're no longer being bullied, or they have one-on-one support and learning. That can be really good for some kids, but a small portion. The gray are kids who are deteriorating, right? They are feeling their mental health is being impacted by the weight of the pandemic, and the more extensions, the longer it goes, it is going down. And the orange, which is actually the majority of kids, are unchanged. And so that's a bit of good news, is that kids, are showing a little bit of resilience. And then I'm sure you would see, if you take into account when school was reintroduced and some of those lockdown measures were lifted, how it goes up and down. So finally, this is the term I came across in the research and I really liked it. It's an evolutionary mismatch. And the COVID-19 pandemic has resulted in a complete change in context. There are suddenly so many things that we simply cannot do the same way we previously did. It's easy to become overwhelmed, but this situation reflects what evolutionary psychologists call an evolutionary mismatch, where the environmental conditions change so swiftly and so dramatically overnight that we find the old patterns of behavior no longer work. So what Dr. Sullivan or Carolyn and Victoria are going to be talking about is new patterns of behavior, right? New tools, new strategies to adjust with it, because it's not normal to have to change everything you do overnight repeatedly over the last year. So new tools, new strategies, new behaviors are always a good idea and are welcomed when it comes to helping improve mental health.
Great, thanks, Tessa. Are there any questions about any of that part? Feel free to just unmute yourself and ask a question, or go ahead and put it in the chat. Is that sort of what you expected?
So it's Shelley.
Hi.
So at the very beginning of Tessa's presentation, it just kind of like made me a bit emotional to realize how much change we've been exposed to. You kind of forget when you're in it, and then when you go back and look at how, you know, the change, especially in terms of school and the kids, you know, the different transitions they've had to go through. It's actually quite incredible. It makes me sad, actually. Sorry, Tessa. Not that you made, but the information made me sad.
No, absolutely. And that's kind of the point of putting it out like that, right? Is like, look what we've been through, because we've been in survival mode, right? We're going from one thing to the next, we're adjusting. If there's one thing parents are good at, it's adjusting, because that's what we have to do in parenting, right? Our kids are changing and evolving and growing all the time. So we're always shifting. But yeah, you think about what it's been for our kids and how much resiliency most of them have shown, really, right? Like it is impressive. And you can't, you know, what we didn't put in there, don't forget also, is whatever your own individual child went through. How many times did they have to go get COVID tested? How many times did they get sent home for symptoms, right? That adds also to this unpredictability of like always wondering. And I don't know about you guys, but I feel like I've been a bit on edge, always wondering what the next news is, right? It kind of feels like there's always something coming. Like, okay, so now, you know, March break moving, and now it's like, okay, is March break really going to happen in April, or is that going to move again? Are schools going to close, right? Because now we're hearing some schools closing because of staff shortages. So that kind of thing makes it very hard for us to live in the present and be calm about it, because we're always worried about the what if, right? When and how. And so that's a lot of the tools we're going to use today. Are how do you cope with those things? Because we're living in a time of such uncertainty always. There's hope, I think, you know, we're at the tail end, but I still think that, you know, getting through the end of the school year is pretty integral to both of us, or to all of us, because I don't know about you, but for me, it's almost impossible to keep up most of, you know, half of my job if the kids are home. And they're older. My kids are 12 and 10 almost, but I can't, it's just, they still need so much. So yeah, thanks for sharing that, Shelley. I think that's a good point for sure. So where do we start, right? Like what's the first step? So 100%, I'm going to say you would have to start with self-care as a parent. You have to start with self-care, because you can't run on empty, right? So when you think about self-care, for many of you, that might mean things like, okay, I know I'm supposed to eat okay, and I'm supposed to sleep okay. And sure, those are important, but there are all these other things, right? Look at these things in this little image here, like forgiving yourself. That's self-care. Taking a step back, asking for help, putting yourself first, right? Asking yourself what you need. When's the last time you guys asked yourself, what do I need? Right? We're always like, what do my kids need? Okay, I got to get this in. And usually we're, you know, very much putting ourselves last, right? Being able to say no to some people, setting boundaries, all those sorts of things are all examples as well of self-care. These are my two images I use all the time. I use these images about parenting before the pandemic. And now I would say these images for parenting are way more important than they've ever been. So the idea that you can't pour from an empty cup, right? If my kid is having a meltdown and I am already completely at my limit, it's going to be very hard for me to be present in that moment and understand what's happening, right? Because all I'm going to think in my head is, oh my God, here they go again. Like, why can't they get a grip, right? I can't handle this right now. But if you've taken care of yourself and you feel like you have some reserves, maybe not a full cup, because that's not really realistic either, but something in your cup, then you have something to draw on. Or the other analogy of remember when we used to be able to travel, putting your oxygen mask on before assisting someone else. If you're not, getting oxygen, you're not going to be able to help anybody. So those images, like really speak to me as a parent as well. So self-care is the first step. So what does that mean? So here, really, what are we talking about? So the idea of balancing different things. So yes, there's the physical, so the exercise, sleep. There's psychological, so that's like your emotional well-being, making sure that you're taking care and nurturing your heart. Spiritual, and that might mean different things for different people. If you're religious, that might mean, being in touch with that. It might mean as well, if you, are into yoga or meditation, that's, how you draw on that, but that's an important part as well. And then very important is support. And that has been probably one of the most challenging, because we really much feel, we very much feel we're alone in this, because we're at home and we're not able to congregate on the schoolyard the way we used to at pickup, for example, or, go out with friends once in a while, or go on dates with our partners, or whatever it is that, really allowed for a bit more of that balance. So that support is pretty important. Drawing on grandparents, perhaps, that were helpful with childcare is not something necessarily that we have the same help with either. So these are the things. How do we balance these things? That's like when we are well balanced, we have more energy to cope with the day-to-day stressors, basically. So self-care refers to things that refuel you rather than take from you. It's like any intentional activity that you do that contributes to your well-being. It's a practice that will give you energy and make you feel calm, bring you joy, bring you pleasure. And certainly it can mean meeting basic needs. And I would say at a minimum, it means meeting your basic needs, making sure that you're sleeping and eating and doing some kind of physical activity, right? But it's very unique to each person, and it's very different for everyone. Some people need more, some people need less, some people need longer, some people need shorter. And then what it actually is that feels good is going to be very different depending on different people. So if practices are implemented with some regularity, it decreases the impact of the elevated levels of stress. So it's not to be underestimated. And unfortunately, it's the first thing to go. And I bet you all would tell me, yeah, I can't make time for myself. There's no time. I don't, right? So I'm going to give you some tools on how to do that. Very important, though, is to just quickly talk about what self-care is not, right? So people commonly confuse self-care with activities that are good for you, right? So since exercise and meditation are good for me, then that's what I should be doing. But again, if that's not something that fits with you or that feels good for you, it can become draining instead of energizing, which is not the point. And if it stresses someone, like the same thing might stress someone out versus make somebody feel very, very good. So, for example, I've heard people say, like, someone would say to me, it sounds like you need a little self-care. And so I'm exhausted and I say, okay, yeah, but I went jogging this morning, but that didn't help. And then the person says to me, well, do you like jogging? And I say, no, I hate it. Right? So I went for a jog, but I actually hate jogging. It doesn't make me feel good. I dread going. Well, that's not self-care. You think that's the right thing to do because that's something that people say is good for you, but it's not necessarily what actually necessarily can help us if you don't like jogging. So sometimes it means not always something that's good for you. It can include things like, a glass of wine. The trick is not to then, drink a whole bottle or 2 bottles of wine, right? We want to be careful about that. But it also means sometimes like not always adding, but cutting out. So that's, a lot of the work I do with parents actually is looking at a schedule and then actually trying to see where can we make room in your week for some self-care. So sometimes, for example, cutting out spending 20 minutes on Twitter or 20 minutes, running to the grocery store for something, and instead hiring a delivery service, right? Or doing click and collect or something like that. Something that would, instead of an hour of grocery shopping, you do click and collect. So you're not adding an activity you're really excited about, only to skip one because there's no time, right? Which ends up making you feel worse. Some people that are very high achieving and top performing might dismiss self-care. I've certainly been guilty of this before, thinking like, oh, I'm a hustler, I'm a mover, I'm a shaker. I don't stop for self-care, right? I am too busy. and I'm too busy trying to kind of move things forward. So it helps sometimes with those people to kind of cognitively reframe to like, you know, scheduled maintenance, you know, if you think of it that way, or self-optimization, some kind of term like that that makes you realize like, okay, well, then it's a little bit more theoretical, I guess, and maybe seems a lot more possible in those situations. Okay, so what can we do? So 2 tips here, 2 tips for how to make time for self-care. The first thing is to sit down and to think of activities. This is the first thing you need to do. So sit down with your partner or by yourself and just think, what makes me feel good? What are some things that I really enjoy doing, that nurture me, that energize me, that make me feel good? And I would actually suggest that you make a short, a medium, and a long, right? So something that doesn't take a lot of time, something that takes a medium amount of time, and something that takes a long, like more time. So a short thing could be something like, you know, going in the bathroom and locking the door and just doing some deep breathing. Sounds, I don't know if you guys have done this. I do this all the time, right? It's the only place I can go. I can lock the door, nobody can find me, and I can take some deep breaths. That can be really helpful. Medium can include things like taking a bath, right? Maybe putting some essential oils in the bath and focusing on the smells and, you know, really just relaxing, or taking a shower with, you know, and really trying to close my eyes and think, instead of making to-do lists in the shower and thinking this is something I just have to get over with, it's like, okay, can I close my eyes and focus on how this water feels on my skin, right? How does it feel? And focus on the temperature, focus on the sensation. That would be an activity perhaps that doesn't take very long either. And then long activities would be things like, for me this winter, for example, it was cross-country skiing, right? It was something I love to do, and I could do it with a friend safely. So it was a social thing for me too. It's like a 2-for-1, but I knew it was like an hour commitment minimum, right? And so there's only so many of those I have in my week that I can fit in. But that it's important to have the list of short, medium, and long, because not all of them are going to be possible with our schedules. So that brings me to the second step, which is the schedule. So I always suggest to parents to sit down on Sundays as part of their Sunday at some point, sit down and make a plan for the week ahead. What do I have to do this week? What do I have to do for my job, right? What are some chunks that are absolutely like, I can't move? And where can I basically put in some self-care? Because if you don't plan for self-care, I guarantee you it's likely to be the first thing to go, right? So if I keep a daily routine, there's definitely a benefit on my mental health. There's a benefit on my cognitive function. And it can really help if it's in my schedule. I don't have to work so hard to find the time. So it helps with motivation and willpower and accountability a little bit, because I've put it into my schedule. So that's my suggestion to you, is to think, for example, look at my week. When can I go for like a 20-minute walk, right? Can I fit that into my day? Like, I have a meeting at this time and a meeting at that time. Okay, but I have, and if you put it in there and you set even a reminder on your like an alarm on your phone or something to remind you to get out, you'll be more productive. We always think if we take time away from our job, we're not going to be as productive when we get back, but the reverse is true. You get back and you're able to be more productive. So scheduling is critical. And I would say, if your terms of like healthy eating and that sort of thing, that also helps if you plan that out on Sunday. What am I going to make this week? What are we going to eat? Do I have the ingredients for these things? What do I need? Right? Those sorts of things. Any questions about this part? You're still with me? We're a small bunch, and this is reminding me just of, you know, how stretched people are, right? Because there was a lot of people that RSVP'd, but you get down to the day, and I totally understand how that can happen. So we're a small bunch, so feel free to pipe in if you'd like to share some thoughts. So sleep. We all say, yes, okay, we need good sleep. Good sleepers have, you know, fewer symptoms of all kinds of things, and just higher, you know, better self-regulation, better stress management. Sleep is really the #1 thing. Everything kind of follows that. So making sure you're getting good sleep, and 100% we know that sleep has decreased. The quality of sleep has been a really, really, really big problem for people during the pandemic. So parents, adults, children, everybody's sleep has become less good quality. We're not sleeping as long and we're not sleeping as well because a lot of our stress comes up right when we're sleeping. So again, the self-care helps for sleeping better. Stress management skills, which we'll talk about in a minute, will also help with sleep. And so these 10 tips are just, some ideas of what we tend to talk about when we talk about good sleep hygiene. So I'm not going to go into these in great detail. I think they're pretty self-explanatory, but they really can help make sure that you get enough sleep and a good night's sleep. Screen time, this is a big one. I know it's a big concern about parenting and how we should parent our kids' use of screen time, but we often forget that we're also models, right? And we're all attached to our phone because we get dopamine releases every time we pick up our phone or it dings. We get the shot of dopamine in our brain, which is very reinforcing, and it becomes addictive because it creates an urge to act, right? We feel this need to check our phone more and more to get that same brain response. It's also a passive form of entertainment. It's easy and it doesn't require a lot of energy. And so it can be very easy for us to get sucked into that. And I think if you extrapolate from that, you can understand what happens to our kids because, they're little versions of us. So certainly for them too, they kind of get sucked in and they can be, easily pulled in and it's hard for them to pull away. So some of the things we're seeing is that it's pulling people apart in relationships as well. So if you're on your phone at dinner, you're not paying attention to the conversations necessarily that's going on at the table and that sort of thing. So it's nice to have a routine and a ritual where sort of everybody takes their phones or their devices and they put them in the same spot. And you say, I'm going to put these here for 2 hours, let's say, like realistic, right? So maybe 2 hours, so dinner time and then a little family time after dinner or whatever you're doing. And then you can kind of all get back on your devices if that's realistic for you, however that works in your family. This is something, don't forget to, most of you, I think the eldest child in this group is 10. So, you're setting up for high school and junior high even. The amount of kids in junior high that have phones is, it's the norm. If you don't have a phone, you're not in the norm at all. And, the kids are sitting around with each other, but all on their devices. And so if you're teaching at home at a young age, how to be present with each other, how to relate to each other and take breaks from your phones, you're modeling it, then you're also setting them up for those years of success, as in the years to come as well. So just a little tip. There are even apps say that if you have an iPhone, for example, that's what I have. So I don't know what the other ones do, but I know they have they keep track of your screen time. So you can actually make it a competition with your family, right? Who can take the longest breaks or who can not look at their phone, right? And make it a friendly competition, just to see if you can motivate each other to be on it a little bit less. So that's part of self-care as well, I'd say. So now we're going to move into self-compassion. I don't know how many of you have knowledge of what self-compassion is, so I'll just go through quickly what it is and what it isn't, and then we'll talk about how to do it, and we're actually going to practice an exercise together today, so you can see how it can play out. So basically, self-compassion, the whole idea of self-compassion is learning how to be your own best friend. I think that's the best way I can describe it. So we're really good at helping other people and supporting other people, right? So for example, your friend calls you and says, oh my God, today, I failed today so bad. I didn't submit the report I was supposed to submit to my manager. I was late to pick up the kids. I fed them garbage for supper, something with no nutrition in it. We watched TV because I was too tired to play any games, and I yelled at them right before bed. And I'm such a horrible parent. So if that was your friend, you'd probably say something to them like, oh, I'm so sorry to hear you had a hard day. We're all kind of going through a hard time right now. This is really, really hard, right? You'd say something like that. That's very compassionate, right? That shows a lot of empathy. But we never do that, or we rarely do that to ourselves. We're so hard on ourselves. We go to bed at night and we're like, today, and I know most of you feel this way because I hear it over and over again. You go to bed at night, you go like, I did crap at my job. I was a crap parent. I was a crap partner. I was a terrible daughter. I was a bad friend today. I failed at everything. And that is just a terrible thing to feel as you're going to bed, right? Because we're stretched so thin, we can't excel, maybe the way our own personal standards. So self-compassion is the ability to stop and be kind to yourself in the midst of suffering. So you become like an inner ally rather than an inner enemy. And this takes practice. If you can think right now, right, there's, I don't know, 14 of you. If you can think for a second about the people who are in this room with you right now, and they were to tell you about a hard time they had, or what it's like to parent in a pandemic right now, just think about what you would say to them, right? And then try to turn that into yourself and try to say that same thing to yourself. Giving yourself that self-love and that compassion is really, really, really important to get through this. So self-compassion has 3 components to it. One is the self-kindness. So that's some of the things I've already sort of talked about, is like the idea that when you make a mistake, we're just really likely to beat ourselves up about it, instead of offering warmth and sort of unconditional acceptance like we would for other people. Common humanity is what we're doing right now, which is this idea of getting together and realizing, you know what, we're all human and we're all in this together. We're all works of progress. We're all going to fail sometimes, and mishaps are going to happen. And so instead of falling into the trap of, I should be able to manage all this, we can say, you know what, it's normal to not be great at this. I've never done this before. None of us have. We're not superhuman, right? So that common humanity can help a lot. And then the last bit is around mindfulness, which is like a real hot topic, and I'm sure you've heard this term a lot, which is really being aware of the moment-to-moment experiences that you're having in a very clear, a very balanced, and a very non-judgmental manner. So if you see this little cartoon here, mindful or mindful, in mindfulness, we just try to quiet the brain. And if you want to bring down the stress and bring down some of the anxiety and that, chatter that's going on in your brain, learning to be mindful is very important. So just kind of trying to quiet your mind. It is hard to do, and it is a practice. It is something that you need to work on in order to get better at it. But it gets better with practice. So you shouldn't give up on it sort of as you're trying it. So I will also do an example with you today of mindfulness. So what is self-compassion not? And maybe you need to print this and you need to stick it up on your mirror in your bathroom. It is not a pity party. It's not only for wimps. It's not selfish. It's not something for lazy people. It's not something for people who don't have a lot of goals. That's all nonsense. I mean, self-compassion is really self-love, and it prevents caregiver burnout. I was on the risk, I will share this with you, that I was on the verge of caregiver burnout a number of years ago, between my kids and my job and all the people I care for. I have a lot of suicidal clients, and it was just intense. And I have parents in a retirement home who are elderly and a dad with dementia, and it's a lot. And I was trying to take care of everybody. And I did a 5-day self-compassion retreat. Never did anything like that before. It took about half a day to get into it and understand and not think this is so weird and so quirky and do I belong here, and really has become a practice that I regularly use and has served me well during a pandemic. I'm grateful that I knew how to do that already, but it's really hard, but really helpful to learn how to do that and to turn inward, to give yourself that self-love to prevent caregiver burnout, which is what some people are going through this year for sure. Okay, so I'm gonna encourage you to try this with me, to try the self-compassion exercise. So what I want you to try to do, and we can't see you, so just don't feel embarrassed. You will watch me do this though. So what I'm going to suggest is you take both of your hands and you place them somewhere on your body that feels comforting and that feels good for you. So maybe both hands are here at your heart, or maybe you feel comfortable with a hand on your heart and a hand on your belly. Some people find it comforting to put a hand behind their neck or a hand on their head. So find something that feels right for you and feels like comforting and loving. So put both hands on your body for me. And I want you to close your eyes. And I want you to tell yourself, it's really hard to be a parent right now. And I'm doing the best that I can. I'm doing enough, and I am enough. And just let that sit for a second. This feels hard because it is hard, not because I'm doing something wrong, right? I deserve that love, and I deserve to be kind to myself, that I'm really doing the best I can. And I'm sure that's brought up, if you've done this, if you did this with me, that might have brought up some emotion. And if it did, then you did it right. And it's a sign that you need to do more of it. It's normal that emotion would come up because we don't stop to give ourselves that kind of love and attention. So I urge you to try to keep doing these exercises as often. It takes just a couple of seconds. When your child, will talk about child meltdowns, but that's an opportunity to step away and say, I can handle this. Okay, I can do this. I'm enough. I can do this, right? Giving yourself that love. I've also, in your resources, you'll see some links to some great self-compassion exercises through apps like Insight Timer. Is one of the ones I like because it's free and it has lots of options. So you can search by self-compassion. It'll bring up all kinds of little things. If you need to listen to someone else's voice walk you through it, they can be really, really helpful sometimes. And some of them are just a few seconds. They're not even that long. So basically what I'm asking you to do is to work on giving yourself the gift of good enoughness, right? I'm good enough. This is good enough. Okay, that's really important. The last part of self-compassion, like I mentioned, is mindfulness. And here we're trying to kind of quiet the mind and be aware in the present moment experience and accepting it. It's a simple skill because it just requires noticing what's happening while it's happening, maybe in all your senses. So focusing on what you hear, what you see, your touch, the smell, maybe a taste. There's all kinds of mindfulness exercises that you can try. Some you'll find fit for you and some you find won't. There's things like mindful eating, so closing your eyes and enjoying the taste of something. Walking outside and looking around and being mindful of what you see in your surroundings. But it can include things like body and breath. It can include a body scan, so paying attention from your head to your toes, how different parts of your body feel. Stretching, breathing. There's lots of different types of mindfulness exercises, and we're going to try one on the heels of the other one. We're going to try one here too. So one of the things, and again, this is something I've been doing a lot of lately, can be very helpful, is focusing on your breath. So when we are stressed or tense, we tend to breathe very shallow from the upper part of our chest. And what we want to do is bring that breath into the belly. Those of you who have given birth, you might have learned how to do this, right? And get you through labor and contractions. We learn how to breathe. If you've done a lot of yoga, you also know how to do this. So the idea of taking a big, deep breath through the nose and then exhaling your breath out the mouth. And what I want you to do is really think about actual words. I want you to think of a word that describes something that feels good, maybe something that you feel you need more of. So things like kindness, self-love, vacation, time with friends. I breathe in patience a lot. So you think about that word as you're breathing in. So I want you to, again, you can put your hands on your chest if you like. Take a big, deep breath, and I want you to breathe in a word through your nose that you feel you need more of, okay? Something that feels good. So breathe in. And then I want you to breathe out through your mouth something you have too much of. So maybe your desire to control or to plan the future, maybe worries you have about your daughter or your son, maybe your own anxious thoughts. So breathe in something like kindness and breathe out worries. This is a good one to do too when you're lying in bed at night and you can't sleep. You can breathe in sleep and breathe out worries, or breathe out your thoughts, right? Breathe out a busy mind. And you're really focusing on your breath, and suddenly it kind of just lulls you to sleep and you don't even realize it. There's lots of research now showing that these daily mindfulness practices can show an incredible decrease in anxiety symptoms, similar to that of actually taking anti-anxiety medications. So that's a pretty significant effect, and it is not an easy thing to do, especially for very high level functioning people who are used to having busy minds all the time and making to-do lists and all those sorts of things. So it is a practice. You need to be patient, and when intrusive thoughts come in, you need to recognize, oh, there they are, and then you have to say, no, I'm going to let them go, right? I'm going to let them go And you just acknowledge them and try to let them go so that you can go back to breathing or focusing on the exercise. Again, insight timer. I'll type it in the chat for you so you know what I'm talking about, because I know it's hard to hear that word. Insight timer is a great app that has lots of different types of meditation exercises, and so does Calm. I know some people love that one. The first 7 days are free and then you have to pay for that one, but it has really great exercises as well. And some of them are very short. So it's really just finding, 5 minutes, 10 minutes a day. I tend to do it before pickup, right? As I'm transitioning from my job to my parenting job, my paid job to my parenting job, shifting. That's a good time to kind of think about trying that. So any questions about this part around self-care? Okay. All right, so we'll move on. It's only once you take good care of yourself and you again, are aware and give yourself that compassion that we can really move into talking about parenting techniques. So we structured this workshop to go in order really of a sequence that makes sense in terms of the order in which you should focus your attention. So Victoria is going to talk to you about the top 3 pandemic tips for parenting.
Thanks, Carolyn. All right, so when we were, as Carolyn just said, thinking about this workshop, we really wanted to give you as parents practical things you can do now without overwhelming you. And so we've picked out a few things that we think would be helpful. And you might already be doing a version of some of these things already, but hopefully we can give you and talk together about some different ways of approaching some of these things that you've probably heard of before. And so our top 3 pandemic parenting tips are to have a schedule and COVID routine, spend quality time together, and emotion coaching, which leads well into our emotion regulation after this. So let's dive right in. What we know is that in times of uncertainty and unpredictability and instability, parents, like, you rock at this. This is something you do all the time. You modify and you adapt and you change and you grow. And it can be super hard, but we're good at this as parents. But our kids, this pandemic very well might be the first time in their lives that they've really had to deal with this, this level of unpredictability, but unpredictability in general. And so when we face uncertainty like this, that's where we see things like meltdowns and just emotions running rapid. And so what can we do to help kids that are living in something that is so unpredictable? Well, we can give them some structure and routine. And you might have realized or seen in your own kids, like after the last year where schools closed, their return to school in September, you might have actually seen your kids' behaviors improve and become better, because suddenly they've got this structure, this routine of, I wake up in the morning, I go to school, I come home from school, and then I do it again the next day. And so that sense of predictability is back in some way, because they know what's expected of them to go to school and things like that. And so how can we as parents give them even more structure in their lives? You'll see here on the screen, we've got sort of like an after school routine and schedule that has things like getting homework done, chores, bathing, that kind of thing. And these are all important parts of after school life, but you'll also see that we have things structured in here like potential screen time. So this is a great way to kind of use screen time as currency, because you have these things that your children need to do, like homework and chores. And so we can increase the predictability that they have in their environment by saying, well, if you get your homework done, then according to this schedule, 5 o'clock, you can have some screen time. And so the kids know, okay, well, if I get these things done, I know what I need to get done. It's tangible. I see it on my schedule, what I need to get done. Then I know that I get to have this screen time. And so it's very predictable in that environment. And also when they do get that screen time, that's a perfect opportunity for us as parents to take a minute for some of that self-care that Carolyn was just talking about. Kids are occupied on screens. Okay, I have an hour or two. If I need to get a little bit more work done, I can do that, but also take 5 minutes and lock myself in the bathroom and breathe for a few minutes. And that's great because it's built in there. And so even for us as parents, it's a predictable time for us to see, okay, I can breathe at 5 o'clock because my kids are going to be on their iPads playing Among Us or Minecraft or whatever it is. And that's going to be my bathroom lockdown time, and it's going to be great. So it's good for parents too. And it's also important to realize that our kids, we could tell them that this is our routine. It could be the same thing that we do every day, but they need to see it. So we recommend having a visual schedule. And so this could look like printing something like we have as an example here and putting it on your fridge or on the wall, somewhere where your kids can see it. If you have younger kids, you can print out pictures so that they know what's expected of them if they can't read yet. But this way, everyone can see it. Everyone knows what's going to happen, and it's the same. And they can see it every day, and they know what to expect. The other thing too is that sometimes we leave weekends as like this kind of like wild open space. We don't know what's going to happen. It's the weekend. It's open, but it's also important to give routine on the weekend days too. And it can be looser. It can be something like, okay, well, in the morning, people can kind of do their own thing until noon. Then in the afternoon, we're going to go outside together. We're going to have a family activity together. And so it's a great way to also schedule in that quality time, which I'll talk a little bit more about now. So if you're anything like me, when I was thinking about quality time, I was thinking, but we're always together. We're never not together. But the real difference here is, although we might have a large quantity of time together with our kids, the quality of that time might not be as high as it could be. And kids can tell. Kids can tell when the time that they have with us isn't the most quality time they could have with us. And so what is quality time and quality? And we've divided it sort of into two things: one-on-one time, so that if you have more than one kid, that's quality time that you spend with just one of your children, versus family time, which is time that you spend all together as a family. And I'll get into each of these a little bit. So, well, some of you acknowledged in our questionnaire that lots of our kids are having tantrums right now, and that's a form of getting attention. And kids, they thrive on attention, and it doesn't necessarily matter whether that's positive attention or negative attention in the form of getting in trouble or things like that. And so what we want to do is build in opportunities for our kids to have more positive attention, because if they have more positive attention, then they're not going to be seeking out those opportunities for negative attention. And so when you're setting aside time, this is also great for our schedule, because you can schedule in, okay, well, on Mondays at this time, I'm going to take 15 to 20 minutes for one-on-one time with Susie and 15 minutes for one-on-one time with Johnny. And so each of my kids are going to have some quality, positive time with me. And what's that time going to look like? Well, I'm going to do what my kids want to do. So Susie might love playing with dolls, and I might hate playing with dolls. But this is a great opportunity for us to fake it till we make it, and join them in their imaginative world, and just be there. And it might feel really painful, and I'll admit it feels really painful for me sometimes too. But it's going to be so worth it, because then later on in the night when Susie's tired, she's not going to be coming to me trying to pick a fight, because I already gave her the quality time she was seeking earlier in the day. And so I'm going to let her lead me in that play. So if she's like playing with her dolls, I might make a comment like, wow, I really love the way you dressed your doll up. And just commenting on what I see, and not trying to say, okay, well, now we have to take them to the store because that's the right thing to do. Kids love to teach us, and they love to lead us. So it's a good opportunity to let them lead, especially if we feel like I don't know how to play anymore. Like, I'm an adult, it's okay to not be good at playing, but our kids are perfect teachers. So let them teach us. It's also important in this time to put our phones away, remove distractions. they know if we're, scrolling Instagram in the background or sending an email. And that's going to prompt them to want to get our attention even more. So if we can take that 15-20 minute core time with them and put the phones away and really devote it to them, it'll be so good in the long run. And then in terms of family time together, this can be simple. Like, okay, after dinner, we're going to go for a 15-minute walk around the block. And that's just time off our devices together, doing something easy, and also getting outside. So it's like good for self-care for the whole family. But it could also be something that's like super random and out of the norm. Like, hey guys, it's dark outside. Let's grab our flashlights and go play hide and go seek in the dark in the park. And not only will that be so exciting for your kids, but it's going to give you things to talk about that are new and exciting. And when you're having dinner the next day, your kids might bring up, remember when we went to the park in the dark? Wasn't that so fun? So again, more of that positive interaction through quality time. And so with that emphasis on keeping up positive attention, what does that look like? What can we do to increase those positive moments for attention so that we can decrease those times when our kids are seeking that negative attention through like throwing a tantrum or fighting? And it's going to sound super simple, but if I'm going to be honest, it's really easy for me to pick out the things that the people around me in my home are doing wrong or that are annoying. And so to try and shift the focus on catching the kids in our home doing something good, it might seem kind of unnatural at first because we kind of just assume, well, they did their chore, so they know it's good. But if we can really pick out for them things that we love about them, things that we appreciate about them, and catch them doing good, that's another opportunity for us to increase the positive interaction and decrease that negative attention seeking. So praise can be something simple like, you're so funny, I really love your jokes. Or if they got a good grade on a math test, it might be something like, wow, I'm really proud of how much effort you put into that. Like, you worked really hard. I'm really proud of you. We can also see, like, when catching good or being brave, especially with COVID, this is a great opportunity to, especially those anxious kids that are worried about COVID or their friends getting sick. You can encourage them by saying something like, I saw how you went over there to talk to your friend, even though I know you're scared about COVID. That was really brave of you. I'm proud of you. And these are just some simple ways that we can increase this positive attention to our kids. And of course, with our kids, touch is so comforting. And I know some of you might be touched out, like my kids touch me all the time. I'm touched out. But it can be a really effective and powerful approach when your kid's really upset, to just be there with them, to give them a hug, to cuddle, or wrestle. If you lots of our young boys love to wrestle, and all of those interactions are, again, another way that we could positively interact with our kids to decrease that their seeking of negative attention from us. So I'm going to leave it there and pass it over to Carolyn again, who's going to kind of continue on with this emotional dysregulation piece. But I don't know if we want to pause for a second to see if anyone has any questions about what we just covered.
Any questions? All right, thanks, Victoria. So if you think about, I mean, again, I think if you're thinking about shifting a few things in your home to make things a little bit easier for you, if you're struggling with certain things, I think that, it could be overwhelming to think about, like, okay, how do I carve out more special time and this and that? So first, again, if you kind of schedule it in, but if you also think of it as like putting attention in the bank, so that, you're just shifting where you're putting your attention, basically. So hopefully the time kind of evens out. It's just where you're putting it is a bit different. And in that example of the schedule, you saw like one-on-one time with kids kind of shifting from one day to the other, or maybe switching. If there's two parents in the home, you can flip one day one is with one and the next day the other one is with the other parent, and then the other one has the other child, for example, in a different room or something like that. So one of the main things that has come out on the surveys was around dealing with tantrums and meltdowns. So that's what the focus really of the rest of this talk is going to be about, is around tantrums and meltdowns and emotion regulation and how we kind of handle those things. These are great tools that are really for any age. So I'm hoping it will transcend across all of you, but also in your future parenting journey of what's to come in terms of older kids. So before we get into the technique itself, let's talk about emotion dysregulation in general. So certainly for me in my house, I've seen more meltdowns this year than I probably ever have. So let's talk about what are those tantrums telling us, right? Or those meltdowns, depending on what you call it at different ages, I don't know. I think sometimes adults have tantrums, you know, I think they're ageless, but let's put this in adult terms. So imagine you've had this day, okay? Put yourself in this possible day you could have had. So the day starts and you spill coffee all over your shirt. Then your boss tells you she isn't happy with how you handled a presentation. Then you get a speeding ticket on your way home from the store where you just, you know, CAFCO, where you just spent $600 on groceries. And then you get through the day, get through dinner, and it's bedtime and the kids are being difficult. They won't go to bed, they keep getting up, and you just want some peace and quiet. So then finally the kids go down, you're having dinner with your partner and your glass of water spills all over your plate. And you start crying and you scream, "I can't take it," or some other choice words that I won't type here, or that I won't say here. So imagine for a second that happened to you. So there's two questions. The first is, what's really going on here? And the second is, what do you need right now, if that was an example that happened to you? So here are the answers, okay? And this is for sure true for me, and I think you guys will relate to this. So what's really going on? So first, let's pretend this was me. I've had so much built-in frustration in the day that was building in my body that then the water spilling was like the straw that broke the camel's back, right? So yes, the spill was upsetting. And yes, that wasn't the only reason I had a meltdown. The spill was released, basically the spill released all these pent up emotions from the day. What do I need? And the answer to what you need is basically, I need someone to understand that there's more going on here, right? That there's a history and that they didn't see, and maybe they don't yet understand, and that the water spill must have been part of a larger story, right? I need someone to lead with the assumption that I'm having a hard time for a reason, not under the assumption that I'm overreacting or that I'm being ridiculous. So what would this look like in real life? Well, if a partner said to me after pausing, after I dropped the water, something is going on here, something important, and I'm here. Or even something like, oh, I bet you really wish that water didn't spill. Or maybe, oh, you know, slightly with a lighter tone, something like, oh, geez, that sucks. You know, poor you, this sucks. If instead I was greeted with something like, why are you crying about water? Like, who cares? Or, oh my goodness, Carolyn, like, stop crying. You're being absurd. Well, that would feel pretty awful, right? I'd feel alone. I would not only be in distress of that moment, but I would be in distress for like the whole day and what this means and my relationship, and right. So now I felt judged instead of getting support, which is what I really needed. So now translate this to our kids. Like, our kids have so many frustrations, so many setbacks, so many challenges during their days, many of which we don't hear about. Right? The day-to-day in a school, like, lots of things happen at school that set them off at different points. Things didn't go the way they want. The game didn't go the way they want. They didn't get the turn. They didn't get to play with this. This friend was mean. Like, think about it, right? A lot of things could happen. So a lot of things are hard, and that distress that they're feeling builds up. And so what happens when you, and what we're going to talk about is when you lead with generosity at their next meltdown, assume that there's more to the story. It doesn't mean there's no boundaries. Like, I love boundaries. So you'll see it's not just that, but I want you to try this new mindset of thinking about, wow, this is part of a bigger story and what is actually happening. So what is a tantrum actually saying to me? A tantrum is not an attempt to manipulate a parent, even though sometimes it feels that way. It's really a desperate plea for like a warm, sturdy leader, right? A tantrum is basically a biological state of dysregulation. So if you can reframe a tantrum, this could be critically important, right? If you can, like, not only in that moment can you help someone, when we feel, we can really feel like we're on the same team as somebody, right? As we're helping them. If you reframe tantrums, that activates our compassion, that reminds us that our child needs help, not our contempt. This is really the first step in shifting a dynamic that happens in some homes. So if you tell yourself, my child is telling me that their feelings are too big to live inside their body. They become too powerful, and so they're exploding out of their hands, their legs, maybe their mouth, and they're telling you they hate you and you're a terrible parent. And that's why we see hitting or flailing, kicking, screaming, swearing, calling you names, right? But if I can tell myself, my child's tantrum is her pleading, please help me. Like, I'm terrified, I need a sturdy leader who can help me, who can show me that this emotional storm is tolerable. Help me feel safe. Then that changes how I respond to it. So we're going to move into this technique called emotion coaching, which is basically, it's going to make a lot of sense to you when I tell you about it, but it's not intuitive. Okay, it's not intuitive. Most people don't have a natural tendency to parent this way, but there's so much research on this approach to show that children of parents who take on the role of emotional coach do much better in many areas in terms of academic performance, social skills, their physical health, but it also sets the stage to have teenagers who keep talking to you, right? There's a lot of teenagers who stop talking to their parents when parents really want to keep talking, right? And so when you set and you've established this pattern of a way of talking about emotion with your children when they're younger, which is why I love these workshops with elementary school age kids, because you have lots of time to kind of establish that, that kind of way of communicating that's very different. Really, the foundation for emotion coaching is empathy, and it's good for all ages. It's amazing for all relationships. If you use some of these strategies in your relationships with your partners, you might actually see and notice big changes in terms of how they respond to you and how your relationship feels. So you can try some of these things I'm going to talk to you about. I'm going to give you lots of examples. So it's really around connection, and it can help strengthen relationships, help regulate emotions, and that sort of thing, right? So for example, if your partner was to tell you, that they miss seeing their friends, they say, you know what, this pandemic sucks. Like, I'm so sick of it, and I really miss seeing my friends. So, or let's pretend it's on you because it's easier to make it about us. So let's say we tell our partner, I really wish I could see my friends. I really miss them. And my partner says to me something that starts with "at least." That's not empathy, right? At least you have friends, or at least, we don't have COVID. Like, yes, it's a sacrifice, but like, we don't have COVID. So at least that, or, think of everyone who has it worse than you, kind of thing. That's very dismissive, right? That's what we call dismissive. And when we're dismissive of our kids' emotions, it actually happens, what happens is kids internalize the message, you know what, my feelings don't matter. My feelings don't matter, and so maybe I'll stop sharing them, or maybe I'll act out more, or I don't know, right? So they just learn that their feelings don't matter. If my partner says to me, stop crying, why don't you go in the other room, or suck it up, those kinds of messaging, that's really disapproving. So the options here are to be dismissive or to be disapproving. And people who have parents who are really disapproving, learn to feel pretty bad. And they really learn not to share their emotions at all because it's not safe, right? So it's not safe, so I'm just gonna hold in my feelings. And this can lead to problems for sure in adolescence, right? So we really don't wanna see that. And maybe some of you grew up in families where your parents were dismissive or were disapproving. And so what your relationship is with emotions. This just gets established young. So it is something that's a little bit in our control. Versus if my partner said to me, I see that you're feeling really sad right now. I miss my friends too. And why don't you tell me more about it? And we start talking about it. And then maybe later, my partner says to me, like, maybe we could think of things you could do. Like, could you think of something you might want to do with your friends? That I'm happy to watch the kids. Maybe you could go for a ski with them, or, maybe you could FaceTime them or whatever it is, right? So think about how this relates to kids, right? This is an adult conversation we just had, and think about how different you would feel if your partner responded that way. Now let's think about our kids. So it's emotion coaching in its entirety is 5 steps. And we're going to go through this. But the key really is, the number one key in emotion coaching is just to slow down. Don't try to fix it. Most of us, immediately as our kid tells us they had a horrible day and my teacher was so mean to me, the first thing you want to do is fix it, right? You want to say, what did you do? And then you want to like contact the teacher and try to fix it, right? Or something like that, or try to get them to know what to do to fix it. That's not the point of emotion coaching. It's to slow it down, right? So it's really important, because basically you want kids to pick up, and the point of it is for kids to understand that their feelings are not the problem. Maybe the misbehavior is a problem, but their feelings are not the problem, okay? So we'll go through each of these steps, some in more detail than others, but the idea is you're connecting before you're directing. That's the key, right? Connect before you direct. So first step is be aware of your emotions. There's 2 parts to this. The first thing you need to do is, how do you feel as a parent? What do you feel? So again, your kid walks through the door, throws their backpack, kicks off their boots, and says, I hate school. I never want to go back. Life sucks. I hate everybody. And you just had a really hard day at work and you're exhausted, and you say to yourself, oh my God, I can't believe they're doing this again. I'm so tired. Maybe you'll even say things sometimes like, I don't really like my kids. It's okay to have those thoughts, by the way. We love our kids. Sometimes we don't like them. That's okay. I shouldn't say this too loud. But that is part of, parenting. So what exactly are you feeling? And this is the time to take a deep breath and put the hands on your body. Give yourself that compassion. Okay, I can do this. I'm equipped to handle this. Take a deep breath before you respond. Then we want to tune in. What is this actually about? What are they doing? Are they yelling? They're screaming. They can't breathe. They're breathing really quickly. I don't know. And what are they actually saying? My kid comes through the door many days like that. And what he's actually saying is, I hate COVID and I wish life could go back to normal. That's what he's actually telling me through that behavior, right? And I might dig to find that out, but the behavior that I'm seeing is not necessarily what's actually happening, okay? So the first step, pay attention to your body, calm your body down, and then try to tune into what exactly your child might be feeling. The second step is connection. So this is a time for intimacy and connection. You want to take your kids' feelings seriously, always. It's important. You might miss some of them. I mean, there's lots to process, so you don't have to stop and have this conversation about every single one of them. But when there's a pattern, especially, and you notice like every day they come home from school a certain way, or they're talking about a specific teacher over and over again that they're having problems with or whatever, that's when you want to tune into those things that kind of come up more often. So here we're going to try to encourage them to keep talking, right? So, hey, I see you're having a hard time. Let's go sit on the couch. Let's go cuddle. I see you're upset and I'm here. If they're having a meltdown, you sit on the floor next to them and you say, I'm here. I see you're upset and I'm here. So you're acknowledging their emotion. You're putting it on the table, right? And you're going to help them learn skills to soothe themselves. That's next. And this will serve them for a lifetime, right? I mean, think about your emotion regulation skills and how much you've had to use them this year. Some of us are better at it than others, right? But that's really important. It's also important in this to really, as a parent, think about if there's any kind of emotions that your child has that are difficult for you or cause you discomfort. Like, are you okay with sadness, but you have a bad reaction to anger? Okay, what's that about? Reflect on it, think about it, because that can help know why certain situations are more difficult than others, right? And then maybe you can give yourself some compassion. This is hard. I don't like anger. It makes me feel unsafe. Whatever it is, right? And then you can be able to kind of get deeper in those emotions so that it doesn't become as uncomfortable. The third step is to listen and validate. And this is the empathy stage, right? So I'm actively listening. I put down my phone, everything stops. I make eye contact, I'm listening, I'm trying to see things from their perspective. I'm reflecting back what they say, right? I'm using words. I'm trying not to apply logic to teach anything. I'm just trying to listen. And this is so hard, okay? It's like a non-judgmental curiosity, right? So I have a child who's in grade 7 who comes home sometimes with topics and things that I find hard to hear. Yeah, right, hard to hear. And I have to put that poker face on to be like, oh, really? That's interesting. Can you tell me more about that, right? Tell me more about that. And I bite my tongue about what I'm really feeling or thinking, because it can come later, but in that moment, I just want to hear, right? I want to get, and that's how we keep our kids talking. If you want a teenager who's going to tell you what's going on with their friends, or if they're doing drugs, or their friends are doing drugs, or what people are up to, or sex, or whatever, right? All this stuff that's hard with teenage years. Sorry to put you into the future for a second, but if you establish that now, that it's okay to talk about those things and you're going to listen without judgment, that is the best thing you can do, because you are setting them up, right, for that, for later. So we're trying to listen in a non-judgmental way before we try to problem solve. It's coming, but at this stage, we want to just be listening, right? So help me understand what happened. Tell me more about it. When you say blah, I hear blah. Did I miss anything? Do I understand, right? Help me understand. And then you can say things like, you know, I'm sorry that toy broke. I know it was your favorite. So these validating kind of comments, right? I know how much you hate COVID. Me too. It's so hard to be able to not see our friends. And you might at this stage even share something about yourself. It's helpful to do that sometimes, to say things like, you know, I remember when I was 12, I would often feel nervous about whether my friends would like me or not that day, right? And I was nervous going to school, hoping that there would be no drama, you know. And then suddenly your kid's like, what, you too? You know, and there are lots of times where you might share something like that about your own past, where they said it humanizes you, right? And then your kids kind of, I'd be careful what you share, but there are lots of things you can share that can be really, really helpful for them. The fourth step is to label. This is very important, to help kids label. Some kids have incredible knowledge of emotion, and some kids, most kids don't. They need coaching, they need to learn. So it's going to be hard for them to label their feelings sometimes. But if they have the words, like, I'm so disappointed that I didn't get the best grade on that test. I'm so disappointed. You want them to be able to say that instead of come home and start punching things because they're mad, right? You want them to, and this you can teach them. I see that you're mad. Tell me about it. And then, oh, I see you, you know, you were disappointed, weren't you, that you didn't get yours? So you're helping them have the words. You know, and some people are really afraid to label the feeling and put it on the table in case it makes it worse. I think that's the main thing parents are afraid of, that it's going to like suddenly get out of control and then you're not going to know what to do with it. And most of the time, that's 99% of the time, that's not what happens. When you put a feeling on the table, it actually de-escalates, right? You seem sad right now. And it's like, oh, now we're connecting. Like, you get me, right? You seem frustrated. You really seem frustrated with this homework. This seems really hard. Like, you're really frustrated. Or you're really excited about this video game when they've asked you for the billionth time to buy the latest Minecraft skin or whatever it is, right? The latest dance in Fortnite. And you're just like, oh, I see, you're really excited about this video game. So you're reflecting the feeling. So it's important to have the words. And here's a couple of little cartoons, right? So this first person, I mean, if I asked you without seeing the words, what you would have said, what is this person feeling? You know, you might say sad, you might say lonely, hurt, you know, isolated, abandoned, embarrassed, disappointed, I don't know. But there's lots of possibilities, right? There's nuances there. And there's a big difference between being embarrassed and being sad, but we may not pick that up necessarily right away. Or with anger, there's different feelings that could be going on. So there are two things that can help with this. One are what we call emotion wheels. And if you actually Google emotion wheel, you can find something like this, where you've got tons of words. And you could print this up and put it in your house to help them learn and have words for their feelings. That helps a lot. The other thing you want to teach them is it's not all or nothing. So we use feeling thermometers a lot. This is really helpful. So not everything is a 10 on 10. And some kids, especially kids with emotion regulation issues, they really kind of go from 0 to 100 and there's like no in between, right? So you want to know that, like, you know, I don't know, Christmas morning, for those that celebrate Christmas, is like a 10 on 10 in excitement, right? Unbearably exciting. But maybe a 4 on 10 is like a dessert that you really like, right? You're eating an ice cream or something that you really like. So the idea that there's range. And so first of all, when a child comes home and says how angry they are about something, you can ask them, okay, can you give me like 1 to 10? How angry are you? Okay, and what can I do to help you come down to an 8, right? What can we do together to bring you down to a 7 or something like that? So that they can start to see that they are the ones that have control in bringing that down. Because kids think that their feelings are not their own, right? It's something you learn. Okay, I have control over this. What am I going to do about it? I can bring this down. I can control it. Versus, you know, this is out of my control. So that's really helpful to use emotion thermometers or feeling thermometers to help have a number so that you can gauge where they're at, and then you can help them see that it's in their control what we do about the intensity. Does that make sense? So that's a helpful tool too. So that can be put up in your house also. I'm worried now your house is gonna be like plastered with all these things I've asked you to, I suggested you use. You got to find what works for you too, right? These are just some ideas. Okay, the last step, and very important, which I'm sure you guys are wondering about, is around problem solving. So problem solving has two parts to it. One is the limit setting, very important, and the second is around solutions. So it's really only once you've slowed down that you can problem solve and set boundaries. So you want to say something like, it's okay to be angry, but you can't hit me, right? It's okay to be angry, but you can't hit me. So the limit is there, right? I always want you to feel like you can talk to me about this, but in our family, we don't hit, right? We don't hit in our family. And then you slow it down. So some of the key sentences or little triggers that I like to use a lot are things like, in this family, we don't, right? Or in this family, we do, whatever it is. And this will help you with things like, well, at George's house, I'm allowed to play Fortnite. Why can't I play at my house? Well, in this family, in our house, we don't play Fortnite. And that's just a rule we have, and it's a non-negotiable. And every parent can make those decisions for their kids, right? Because you're going to get that around grade 3, 4, 5, you start getting the like, but Johnny can, and right now with COVID, you're seeing a lot of that. And I'll have examples of that coming up about like, but they can see each other outside of school without masks. Why can't I, right? And that kind of thing. So I'll give you some tips on what to say that. But in our family, we make our own decisions, and in our family, we decide this. I won't let you. That's one of my favorites. I won't let you hurt yourself, or I won't let you break this, right? My job is to keep you safe, and I'm not going to let you break that. I'm not going to let you hurt yourself, right? And then my other favorite that I learned from Dr. Becky, who you're going to hear about again, my favorite person to follow on Instagram. 2 things are true, my favorite thing. So you can say, you know what? 2 things are true. You really want to play Fortnite, and you're disappointed that I'm saying no, right? 2 things are true. You're happy that you're going to school, right? And you like seeing your friends, but it's also really hard because there's a lot of rules, right? And that makes it difficult. So 2 things are true. That's a trick one. It's a good one. So the idea that you can have conflicting feelings at the same time, but it's also an opportunity to get the boundaries in there also, right? Kids need boundaries, very important. Even during COVID, they need limits and they need boundaries for sure. And then we can think about solutions, right? So if, I don't know, it's been the 3rd day in a row they've come home crying because of issues with friends, you've had this whole conversation with them, you've slowed it down, you got the feeling. Now you can come up with the part that you wanted to start with, which is what do we do about it, right? So, okay, what can we do, And then think about your own family values, and you can come up with a list on different possible solutions. Is it safe? Are these solutions fair? And then you can weigh them, and then you can try one and see how it works out. And if not, you move to the next one, that sort of thing. But you problem solve kind of together. What do you think we could do about this? Do you have any ideas? And you guys kind of problem solve together instead of me imposing my solution. So again, Dr. Becky, love this quote. So she's a psychologist in the US with this huge following on Instagram. And if you want to follow somebody and that's going to give you just these tidbits, like she gives these little tidbits that I just find like so accessible. I find it helpful as a parent. I actually look at her for my own challenges, but I love the way that she phrases things. It's just really accessible. So I love this. So our kids should not dictate our boundaries, and we should not dictate their feelings. So we as parents are allowed to make decisions that feel right. And our kids are allowed to protest and feel upset about it. So one example, the other day I chose myself, it's a real example. I chose to go for a walk alone after dinner, right? So I'd had a really rough day. I've got a client in and out of hospital who keeps trying to kill himself, and I'm so scared for him. And I'm just thinking like, I need some time. So I got through dinner, and then I thought, I just need to go for a little walk by myself. And one of my kids protested and said, I don't want you to go. And so I had choices here. I could have said, okay, fine, you can come with me, right? Again, sacrificing myself, right? My own self-care. Instead, I said, you wish you could come. It's okay. You're safe with daddy. You're allowed to be disappointed. I love you, and I'll be back soon. And then I just left, right? And it didn't last. He didn't stay upset. He moved on and he did something else. But setting that boundary, like I need this for me, and it's not about you kind of thing, without having to justify, defend myself. And you should never defend yourself to your kid, right? So just being able to say that, it's okay. You're allowed to be disappointed, but I'm going to go do this. I'll be right back. In a family system, I often think about roles or jobs like this. I think that parents' job is to establish safety through boundaries and validation and empathy, and children's job is to explore and to learn through expressing their emotions and their wants, right? So it's okay. And if it's hard to set a boundary and my child is really upset, that's when I put my hand on my heart and I trust myself, right? I say to myself, it's okay, he's allowed to be upset, right? He's allowed to be upset because I set a boundary. That's all right. When my boss tells me I can't get a raise right away, I got to work for it. Like I can, okay, right? I can be disappointed, but I can work towards it. I know what I need to do, right? So our kids are the same. They're resilient that way, as long as it's done, again, sort of with empathy. So bringing this full circle back to the tantrums, then I'll pause for questions. Emotion coaching in action. So what would this look like if my kid came home and had a big meltdown? So my kid walks through the door, has this giant meltdown, let's say, and so I put my hand on my heart. I say, okay, this is real. I'm really upset because I really just, like, I can't handle another meltdown. But I say to myself instead, okay, I can do this. My child needs me and she's having some big feelings. Okay, I can do this. By the way, you can never stop a tantrum once it starts, right? So that should never be your goal, to try to stop it. You got to kind of wait it out, okay? So I'm going to say to myself, okay, I can handle this. And then I'm going to connect with my child and I'm going to get on the floor and I'm going to say, I see you're upset. You had a hard day. I'm here. I'm here. I love you. It's nice to see you, right? And you sit on the floor next to them or you stand around while they're getting their stuff off and you wait. And then you listen. So tell me what happened with your friends today, right? What happened at school today? Tell me about it. Oh, that must have been so hard. It makes sense that you were upset because that happened, right? You wish that your friends hadn't been mean to you, or that they hadn't left you out. So naming the underlying wish, right? You wish they hadn't left you out of this, that kind of thing. So validating, empathizing. And then you can help label their emotions, right? I hear that you felt really embarrassed, when Mr. McKechnie yelled at you in front of the whole class, right? You felt embarrassed when that happened. Something like that. And then you set the limits, right? So you say, again, this example I gave earlier, two things are true, right? We have a hard no right now to Fortnite in our family, and we hear how left out you feel. We care about that, and we'd love to brainstorm other ways that you feel you could connect with your friends. So you're still trying to solve the underlying wish, which is a connecting with, like, I can't play Fortnite, therefore I don't have a social life with my friends. You can say, okay, I'm willing to try to find other ways to brainstorm with you how you can connect with your friends. So when they're out of control and they're not being safe, this is the time on the fourth step. If you don't have to do it earlier, if it's really bad, you have to do it earlier. But if not, you can wait till the fourth step to say something like, my number one job is to keep you safe, right? And right now, safety means carrying you to your room. It means saying no to that video game. It means putting blockers on your computer, right? When they're older, you might say something like that. It means monitoring your screen time. Right now, safety means holding your wrist so you don't hit me. So depending on the age, right, you're going to be dealing with different challenges. Okay, I've been talking for a long time. I hope you're still there. Do you guys have any questions for me or comments on emotion coaching? Does it make sense? Okay. All right. Cool. When a child says, no, you don't understand. Okay, great. Love it. Thank you. So when a child says, no, you don't understand, I might say something like, help me understand. Tell me more about it. I want to understand. Can you tell me more about it? Right? Instead of fighting with them, of course I understand. Like maybe I don't, because to them we're ancient, right? And we've never been kids and we don't know. And especially as they get a bit older, they say more and more of that kind of thing. Like we've never been a teenager, so we would never understand. And it's true. It's like, I've never been a teenager in 2021. Like you're right. Help me understand what it's like. Like help me understand. So I just had this conversation with my 12-year-old around gender diversity, right? So gender diversity is very things have changed a lot since we were kids, right? So help me understand, tell me more about that. What's the difference between gender fluid and non-binary? And like, right, we're having these kinds of tough conversations, and I'm showing this curiosity, and I'm trying to be very non-judgmental about it. And I'll tell you, this is a great example to bring up here, because at one point he did say to me, "You don't understand." And I said, well, help me understand, right? Help me, because when he said basically like named, 5 friends that are all like in gender or in like sexual minorities, basically, I was like, well, statistically, I know that that's really rare, right? That's unlikely. And these kids are just figuring themselves out because they're 12. But I didn't say that, right? So you have to kind of bite your tongue sometimes, like, help me understand. And I try to say non-judgmental, I try to listen. And listen, I have a lot of fails too. I'm telling you examples that I'm thinking of where it went okay, but don't pretend for a second that I don't make a lot of mistakes. I do. But you can have all the theory in the world. When it's your own child, it's a different story, right? Let's just humanize me for a second. That's important. But when you're talking to them and you're trying to connect with them in those moments, you really want to say, you know what, help me understand, because this is a different time when I was your age, right? Like, help me get it. And even though I might think that, I'm not gonna say that, right? That I think what they're saying doesn't make sense or whatnot, right? Because it is the reality. And I want them to keep talking to me, right? So I keep trying to keep that door open. So great question. I hope that answers your question. Any other questions? What happens if a parent is following emotion coaching and the other one is opposite and flipping out? Okay, that's also a great question. It's very rare to have 2 parents who are in line in the same parenting style, right? And so overall, what you want to see is like, you want to be somewhere in the middle. That's ideal, where, you balance each other out. But if you're really on opposite ends, that's a good time when the kids are not around to have a conversation around, what are we trying to do here? Where are we trying to, and what triggers you, what triggers me? Because if you're a team, the good news is you can kind of like play to each other's strengths, right? Like, I know in my relationship, like, there are things I'm really good at, and there are definitely things my partner's way better at. And so we divide that up, right? And it's a conscious thing. Like, when this happens, why don't you let me take, and it's not like you have to say it in a non-judgmental way that they're bad at it, but like, I'm happy, like, I can stay calm and patient in those moments. And why don't, I know this is hard for me, but easier for you. Why don't you take that out? So it balances out. And again, it's not that every conversation around emotion needs to follow this, right? It doesn't. But what might happen is kids might learn, through development, they might start sharing more of their feelings with one parent than the other. And you know what? That's fine, because that's protective, as long as somebody is listening, right? To the emotions. Again, it's not to say that a parent doesn't have tons of strengths in other areas. That just might not be a natural thing for them, and that's fine. They just need to be a little bit aware of it and know when to kind of step away, right? And just be like, okay, maybe this isn't for me. I'll use my strengths and the things I'm good at somewhere else. So that's it's just a consciousness. If they're aware of it, then I think that helps, right? In the situation of separated parents, I don't think I saw that part. Any advice in the end, you can't work things out with the other parent to be on the same page? Okay, sorry, that is a separate comment, right? So in the event of separated parents, again, we have no control over what happens assuming there's, let's say, joint custody, or they go back and forth. You don't have much control, right? And that's tricky. That's very, very hard. So you can only do what's in your control, right? So just try to focus on what you can do and how you can be the best parent you can be with what you have. And trust that, kids do need both parents, and they love both parents so much, and they are entitled to those relationships. But they might be getting different things from each parent, and that's fine, because they're getting it, they're balancing out, is what I would say. Similar, because that's not dissimilar to 2 parents in the same house that aren't seeing eye to eye, right? There's a lot of conflict that happens around parenting in the same house. So you're going to see that too, right? That's what happens now. My kids come to me to share and are now staying quiet with the other parent. Yeah. So that happens. And it's hard to watch, but it's okay. And I think if you have that kind of relationship with your partner about it, I think it's great when the kids are not around to have a conversation about it in a very calm way, but you have to stay very non-judgmental, right? Because they're going to get defensive, and you don't want to attack their parenting. You could just say, I noticed that the kids are coming in more about their feelings rather than you. Does this bother you? Do you think this is something we need to work on, or are you okay with it? I don't mind if you don't mind, but I just want to know, like, where are we at, right? So I think that would be helpful. Hope that answers that question. But okay, thank you very much. You're welcome. Okay, Now, what time is it? We were going to open up to questions for the last 15 minutes. I just had actually, we were going to go into breakout rooms, but we don't think we really have time. Let's just walk through this example together, okay? Just let's pretend. So I put two examples here. I was going to put you guys together to kind of think about, but we're such a small group, we might as well just do it together. So let's think of the first example. So your child comes home very upset. I don't know if you guys heard about this from Manor Park. I definitely heard this year, saying it's not fair. You know, Johnny and Susie have recess on the hills, and we're stuck on the pavement. It's been 3 months we've been on the pavement and we can't play on the hills, and it's so unfair, right? In the grand scheme of things, we might be thinking as a parent, like, okay, who cares? You know, like you got time with your friends, like, you know, you're out of the house. I've been home all day working my butt off. Like, give me a break, right? We might be thinking that, but it's very detrimental to communicate that, right? So some of parenting revolves putting on a bit of a filter, right? And just saying like, oh, honey, that sounds really unfair. Like, tell me more about it. Right? And what else might we say? Can you guys think of things you might do or say here to that example? So you're going to slow down the conversation, right? Your instinct might be you want to write to Marnie, right? You want to write to the principal to be like, how are they at the same place for 3 months? This doesn't seem fair. But you want to slow it down, right? You really want to slow it down and say, I'm sorry, that sounds really unfair. You're like, tell me more about it. Oh, you know, those last month we were there and at least we were like in the next field over so we could play with our friends who were in the other class because we were just like bordering each other. You know how the cohorts can't mix, so they could just border each other, and that was fun. And now like they're so far and I never see them and it's so unfair. So you just keep talking. Yeah, that sounds really hard, honey. COVID, it's just so hard with COVID, right? What did that feel like? Excellent. Great question. What did that feel like? Oh, it was so frustrating and I'm so sad and I just so sick of COVID and I just wish I could not have to have a mask. Sometimes it'll like, what's the word? Like snowball, right? And they'll start saying, and then I have to wear a mask and then this and then this. And then they start talking about all the things about COVID that make it. And so then you know what he's really kind of saying, which is, yeah, you know what? COVID really changes things, doesn't it? COVID, this is really hard this year. So many things are different. I ask about what she does on the pavement and who she plays with and get her talking about the game they've come up with and say how amazing their imagination is. Oh, that's nice. Yeah. So I like that. I think that's looking for the positives, right? Let's look about the positives in what the situation you're in. So I definitely think that's great. I would try to just first validate the feeling, right? So spend some time helping her label how it feels and what does it feel like and tell me more. And yeah, I could see how that would be feel really unfair, right? And I know that you're sad about COVID and all these rules. And then you could ask her about, so that would be part of the problem solving stage almost, would be around, okay, so what can we do about it? Tell me more about what you guys do when you're together and how much, like, what do you guys do that's fun and how can you be creative? And then you could think about games that might be fun and praise them, exactly. But I would say that would come in the fourth stage, right? So that's great. Okay, another example. So your tween or you know, I would say you're probably hearing this if you have kids in, you know, grade 5 or 6, telling you, you know, Joe, Zoe, and Mary got together on the weekend. I saw pictures and they went to Starbucks without their masks. And I hate you for not letting me see my friends. So what could we say here? And you could think of any example to do with COVID, right, that aren't fair. Like I hear a lot about kids who don't follow the rules, right? So-and-so sits next to me and they have always their mask go around their chin and we're going to get sick. And it's why are they allowed to not follow the rules and I have to follow the rules? So you can hear a lot of those sorts of comments this year, I think. Okay. So yeah, that does seem really unfair, doesn't it? Tell me more about it, right? Tell me. That seems really unfair. What was it like for you to hear that they had gone out together, right? What's it like? Yeah, I could see that would make you feel really left out. Yeah, that's really hard, right? Because they did this together and you couldn't go because of our rules. And that must have made you feel really left out. So this conversation doesn't have to last an hour, right? I mean, it can be very short. I think I need to specify that because sometimes we're afraid to get into this because it's going to last forever. But it doesn't have to last an hour, right? And you can say, okay, well, you know, yeah, just, you know, tell me more about it. Then you label the feeling and then you can say, you know, I know, you know, it's not COVID related, but when I was younger, I always felt, you know, it was really hard when friends got together and saw each other outside of school and I wasn't invited. I used to feel really left out. I know what that feels like. It's really hard. It's really hard. And now in your time, maybe they saw this on Instagram or something. And then you see, you know, now you have Instagram, so you can see the things you're missing out on. And that's really hard. I'm sorry you weren't able to join. I miss my friends too. Beautiful. Liz, that's great. Yeah, I'm so sorry you weren't able to join. I miss my friends too. Excellent. Yeah. And then you can go to problem solving, right? You can say like, 2 things are true, right? We're not allowing you to see your friends on the weekends without masks, because those are the rules we established for a family, because we have contact with grandparents, or if you need to explain it, you can, right? Or we have, immunocompromised people in our family. And I hear how this messes up your social life, right? I'm saying no, and I care about how that makes you feel. And then maybe you could say something like, how else can we help support you to see your friends? What else can we do, right? What else can we plan? All right, excellent. So this takes practice. Be patient with yourself, but you will see some serious gains in all relationships if you do a little bit more of this in terms of helping with emotions. The last slide, this is the last thing I have to talk to you about, is around different strategies, specific strategies for those kids who have real emotion dysregulation issues. So one of the things we encourage parents to do for kids like this is actually to create a chill out zone. And I actually think this is useful for any kid in any house, all kids really. And that's like to have a place in the house that you decide with your child, you involve them in this conversation. I'd like to make a chill out room for you, a chill out zone for you that you can go to when you're feeling overwhelmed, a space that's just for you that you can go to feel calm. And then maybe, you have a beanbag chair and they go in, they get it. Okay, where do you want to put it? Okay, this is your spot. Excellent. So this is now your chill out zone. You got your beanbag chair. This is your spot. What can we put in here that's going to help you feel calm? So I'm a big fan of fidgets. I always have fidgets around. Things like a Rubik's Cube is a great fidget when you're feeling anxious or uncomfortable. You don't have to look at it, just like, unless you're, a genius. And I still can't figure out how to do this. But if you just, move it around in your hands, that can be something. Blowing bubbles, if you allow bubbles in your house, that's a great thing as well. It actually helps. We blow bubbles all the time with kids to teach them how to breathe properly, because kids breathe from up here. They don't breathe from their bellies. So one of the ways we teach kids to breathe is to blow bubbles, because if you blow quickly, it pops. But if you blow real slow, deep belly breaths, you can make a much bigger bubble. So bubbles might be there. Maybe in the little basket, you have like stress balls, or you have some putty that they can pull and like fidget with. I'm also a big fan of glitter jars. So I always have this lying around. So a glitter jar is just like a jar of water. And then it's a nice craft to do. I do this with kids when I do therapy. And right now I'm doing therapy through the computer. And the amount of kids I've watched, like as we're building it together, they just spill the glitter like all over their house. It's like so hard to watch because there's nothing I can do about it through the screen. So you want to supervise this. If you have a young kid, it can make a big mess. But what you want is a jar, fill it with water, and then you put clear glue, a lot of clear glue, and glitter, and that's it. And then when you shake it, it's beautiful. It's really nice to look at. This is ageless. I actually use this for myself sometimes. And then as you practice deep breathing, you watch the glitter settle. I don't even know if you can see that, but the glitter is falling to the bottom, right? And so they can sit there and watch the glitter. And if the sun is coming through it, it's just so beautiful. I gave one of these to my stepdad, actually, who has dementia, and he stares at it a lot. It's a really beautiful thing to just look at and breathe and watch it settle. It's very calming. So that's another example of something that could be in the chill out zone. Another great strategy, as I mentioned earlier, is like a meditation practice. Every kid should learn how to meditate, honestly. And I put some great tools in that handout with specific CHIO release. Actually, it's called the Mind Masters 2. If you have children between the age of 4 and 9, it's kind of intended for them, and it's free. If you Google it, you'll find it through the Ottawa Public Health website. But it's an amazing series of different exercises that allows kids to learn how to calm their bodies down, how to settle their brains, how to be quiet and still. And there's lots of apps for kids as well, if you have an iPad or on your phone. So I put those in there as well. But it's a good thing to do as a family, because everybody needs a meditation or a mindfulness practice. So you can do them together as a family, right after dinner or right before bed, as they learn to calm their bodies down. Because when you learn to calm your body down in a time of low stress, and it becomes your new normal, then you can access those tools in times of high stress. So that's part of the deal, is that you learn how to do that with time. Maybe also listening to some calming music, setting something up in their room so they can go in there and listen to quiet music, deep breathing. A worry jar, that's another thing we do, where we get like a jar or a box, and we decorate it, we make it a big deal, and we say, okay, now this is a worry jar, and when you have worries, you can write them down, or if they don't know how to write yet, they can tell them to you and you write them down, and you put them in the worry jar, and so they're out of your brain. The idea is worries aren't part of who you are. You have to get them out of your head. So whatever you're worried about, let's put it in the jar, and maybe every couple of days you open up the jar together and you look at what's in there, right? And so suddenly the things you were worried about don't seem as important. The things that are really important that stand out can be processed and you guys can talk about it. But worry jars are something we use a lot with kids and teens. Very, very helpful thing. And in fact, you can buy, I don't know if you guys remember when I was a kid, we used to have these little dolls, these little worry dolls. So if your kids are younger, that's kind of a fun thing. They can whisper their worries to their little worry dolls. They're mini, and then you hide them under your pillow, right? And the idea is like now your worries are safe with them, right? You got to be careful though to make sure that your kids don't have like too many worries or their worries aren't too serious, because it's not magic. So that would be tricky, but at least they're there. The idea is getting it out of their head. So just be careful about that. And the last is a bath. So putting, essential oils in the bath or bath bombs or things to help it smell nice might really be nice and calming for your child, or taking a shower and focusing again on the water on their shoulders, like finding what works for them and coming up with this list maybe with them would be great. We have a worry plaque that changes from red to green when the fairies have heard it. Oh, that's adorable. I like that. That's nice. I like that. The only thing I just worry sometimes about those, that if the child has and again, I don't think that's the case with most of the kids in this, your kids, is that, some kids that have a lot of maybe they're bordering on anxiety, it's just a lot of above and beyond the normal little worries, that they think magically they're gonna get solved, right, by the fairies or so we just have to be careful about that. But for most kids, I think that sort of thing can be really, really helpful for sure, which is great. Yeah, I think that's all I want to say about that. So maybe what I'll do is stop the recording at this point and sort of open it up to any more questions you guys might have. Happy to answer them, and you guys can let me know if you were able to get the handout in the chat. All right. So thanks everybody. Take good care, and I'm just going to stop the recording now so we can answer any questions you might have.